welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here, welcome. My name is Stella and I make videos talking about current technologies and tutorials on how we can use them. Today I'll be going over how to set up a MySQL database connection in the Laravel Framework and how to write to and read from the database. If you don't already have Laravel installed on your computer, I made a video on that and I'll link it above. So let's get started. First, we need to create a database for Laravel to connect to. To do that, we'll go to the terminal and make a MySQL database by first logging in, my password, and then to create a database, we will type create database and we'll name it Fun Project. Now that we have our database created, I like to have a GUI to easily edit and see the tables that we create. There are many different GUI options, however, for this video's purpose, we'll be using Table Plus. If you don't have Table Plus already installed, we can go to tableplus.com and we can download it for either your Mac or your Windows. Once Table Plus is downloaded, let's open it up and create a new connection. It is going to be a MySQL connection. We can name this MySQL connection anything. For our purpose, we will do Fun Project. Next, we're going to be using our localhost, so localhost. Then we'll type in our username for our MySQL connection and our password. Lastly, we need to include the database name of the database that we're connecting to. For our case, it is Fun Project. Next, we're just going to test if our MySQL connection is okay, and since everything is green, we are ready to save this and connect it. Now we are currently in our Fun Projects database. So there are two ways to set up a table. We can set it up in Table Plus itself, or we can use Laravel migration. Let's first create a table in Table Plus. To do that, we will go down to this plus button right here, and in the structure is where we define our column names and data values. The first column is already done for us, and that's our ID, which is going to be our primary key. To add a column, we will go down to plus column, and we will name our column name book name. Then we can set our data type to varchar down here. We will add another column called author, and we will as well set that to varchar, which is basically string. And then we'll add one last column, and we'll call it rating. But this time, we will set it as an integer. After we are done with creating the column names, we can name our actual table, and I will name it books. After that, to save the table, we will hit Control or Command S, and now our books table is created. Let me move Table Plus to the center a little more so you can see it easier. And now let's add some rows to our table. To do that, we will go down to plus row. The ID will automatically increment, so we don't need to worry about that. For our first book name, we'll just name it Book 1, and author of John Smith, and a rating of 3. We can add another row and name the book name Book Number 2, set the author name to Jane Doe, and a rating of 5. We'll add one more row and call it Book 3 with an author Jack Tarr, and a rating of 4. Once we are done inserting our rows, let's save the table. And now we are ready to access this database using Laravel. So let's go back to our terminal and exit out of our SQL. Then let's open up our Laravel project. So it's in my code, and I called it Fun Project. And now let's open up our Visual Studio Code. Now that we have our Laravel project open, we need to connect our Laravel to the actual MySQL database. To do that, we will go down to the environment file. And in here, our database connection is MySQL, so we can keep that. Our host is our localhost. Our database name is Fun Project, however, the P is supposed to be capitalized. My database username is root, and then type in your password. After you're done typing in the information, save this file, and now you're ready to start pulling data from the database. To just give you a general idea of how this code is going to work, in my route file for my web.php, as soon as we type in funproject.test, we will go to our controller and our function show. And in my controller file, the function show will return the view show books, which is my blade show books file here. And right now, when we give this project a run, funproject.test, I've manually added the rows and columns to create a table that is exactly the same table we have in Table Plus. Now, instead of hard-coding the table values, let's pull from the database we have created. To do that, we'll go back to our controller, and inside our show function, we will set a variable called books that will reference the database, and we'll import the database facade and reference the table books, And then we'll get the table's components. Now we need to pass whatever we get from the books variable into the view. So we'll have a comma here and square brackets, and it is equal to whatever the books database gets. And then we'll save our controller and we'll go back to our showbooks.blade file to output what we got from the database. I will copy and paste what we have in our body to create a new table, and I'll change this heading to pulling from the database and deleting these components. The reason why I copy and pasted the table is because I wanted to compare the results I got from pulling from the database compared to the hard-coded table. So up here I'll add a break line just for style purposes. I'll be using a for each loop to iterate through the rows in the database and add it to our table. So I'll have at for each, and we're going to reference the variable that was passed to us from the controller, which if we go back to the controller, it was books. So for each books as, and then I'll just say book. And then we can close our end for each. We will make our row and our values for each column. When you're pulling from the database and you have variables, you need to wrap them in curly brackets. Our first column is the book, so we'll type book and we'll reference the column name that goes with book. And if we go back to our table plus, we can see that it's called book name. So here we'll type in book name. And then for our second column, we're going to have curly brackets and book, and the next column is author. For our third column, our book is referencing the rating. So now when we save this Blade file and we go back to our website and refresh this page, we can see that the hard-coded table is the same as the table we just created by pulling from the database. The second way to make a MySQL table is with Laravel's model and migration. The migration is used to create the table and the model is used to reference to it. In more advanced programming, the model is used to set the condition. For example, it will set protected and fillable values based on the user's input to save into the database. For now, we'll just focus on creating a table and referencing it in the controller. We'll start by going to the terminal, and to create a model and migration at the same time, we'll type php artisan make model, and the model will be books copy, and then the -m signifies that you want to create a migration as well. So when we press enter, after our model and migration is successfully made, we can view our models in the models folder right here, books copy, and we can view our migration in the database folder, migrations. And if we expand this, we have a create books copies table. In the migration is where we can set the values for the columns. So let's go to the migration. We can see that Laravel automatically sets an ID column as the primary key and timestamps for created at and updated at. We will add 3 more columns to the table under the schema create function. So we'll say table, and our first column is going to be a string, and our column name is book name. Next we'll have a table that is another string called author. And lastly, we'll have a third column that is an integer, and it is called rating. After we're done creating our columns and their values, we need to transfer the books copies table into our MySQL database. To do that, we'll go down to the terminal and type in php artisan migrate, and then when we go back to table plus and refresh it, we can see our table books copies with our column names book name, author, and rating. Now there are 2 ways to insert our rows into our table. We can do what we did before in Table Plus where we manually entered the rows, or we can use Tinker. Let me show you that. So we'll go back to our terminal, and to activate Tinker, we'll type php artisan tinker. We will create a new variable called book, and we'll reference it to the model that we have created with the migration. We can see that our model is in our app folder. So we will type in new app / models / and then the model name, which is books _ copy, and press enter. So now that we're referencing our model, we are able to write to the database. One of the columns in our table is called book name, so we have to reference that. So we'll do book, and we'll write to the column name book name, and we'll give it a value of book 1. And then we'll do the same with author. Set it to John Smith, and then lastly our rating we will set it to. Then to save our values we will do book save, and we get back a boolean of true. So when we go back to our table plus and we refresh it, we can see that we have created a row with book 1, John Smith, and a rating of 3. Now I'll do the same thing for the next 2 rows. This is what your table should look like after you have inserted the last 2 rows. Now to reference this table, we'll go back to our controller and then we'll make a new line called books copy. And instead of using database and referencing the table name, we can actually import the model that we're using, which is books copy. And then we can use get to get the values of the table. Now we're going to do the same thing that we did for the previous table, where we create a variable that will be passed to the view. So we'll have a comma and we'll name it books copy and set that equal to what we get for books copy. Now we're going to save this controller and go back to our showbooks blade file. So what I'll do is copy and paste the previous table that we made and make a new table. I'll put a break for style purposes, and instead of pulling from the database, we will rename this header to Laravel migration. Now instead of for each books as book, in our controller we referenced it to be books copy. So here we'll change the value to books copy as book. And then when we save this and go back to our website and refresh the page, we can see that we get the same exact values. Oh, I can see that the rating here is 3, so if we go to table plus and see, maybe I made a mistake on the rating here, but that's okay, we can change it to 4, and then we'll save the table plus, and then when we refresh it, we can see that now our tables are the exact same. And that concludes my tutorial. Thank you so much for watching my video. I hope that you were able to follow along and learn some cool new things. I make videos like this every single week, so if you like what you see, please subscribe to my channel. Also, if you have any comments, questions, or suggestions for future tutorial videos, please make sure to leave them down in the comment box below. Other than that, thank you again for watching my video, and I'll see you next week.